You think I believe that? You're guilty and you know it!
No, please, I didn't mean for it to happen.
This is Justice Valley. Oh, hey, how you doing? It starts like any other Tuesday. But within minutes, 64-year-old Greta Jensen is pinned against a wall, slammed into a concrete driveway, and left with a shattered jaw. Welcome back to Justice Valley, where we don't just watch the footage, we dismantle the law behind it. Today's case is a masterclass in how a Karen-style call for a non-existent disturbance can spiral into $1 million civil rights lawsuit. But here's the kicker, the part that'll make your blood boil. After Officer John Baer used excessive force, the department's words, not mine, to break this grandmother's face, he had the absolute audacity to file a request for restitution. Not for the victim's medical bills, but to replace his pants that got torn while he was pinning her down. Was there a crime? No. Was there a threat? You tell me. We're looking at brand new footage from a 2020 incident that proves our rights don't end where an officer's ego begins. Let's look at the tape. Then we'll dive into the Fourth Amendment. So, how does a quiet afternoon talk between an ex-husband and wife turn into a tactical takedown? It starts with a Karen call. In this case, the landlord, Jeremy, decides to play hero based on a neighbor's text message. Now, pay attention to the officer's arrival. Dispatch tells him there's a disturbance. But look at the footage. Greta is standing by a car. No screaming, no weapons, no violence. Even the ex-husband looks more confused than scared. Yet, Officer Baer arrives with his mind already made up. He later claimed he was met with an unusual amount of resistance. But when you watch the tape, that resistance looks a lot like a citizen asking why she's being harassed on private property. This is the danger of the domestic violence label. Cops use it as a blanket excuse to separate people and demand ID, even when, as we'll see later, the landlord admits Greta wasn't actually doing anything wrong today. It's a classic escalation of a non-event, fueled by a dramatic reporter and an officer looking for a problem to solve. This is the exact moment where policing ends and power tripping begins. Officer Baer tells Greta to take her hands out of her pockets. She's cold. She's 64. She's confused. She tells him, "Don't be silly." And that's the spark. To an officer with an ego problem, being called silly is a threat to the badge. Watch Greta here. She realizes this interaction is going nowhere, so she does what any free citizen should be able to do when no crime is committed. She tries to walk away. But Baer isn't having it. He snaps. He grabs her arm, and the investigation instantly turns into a wrestling match. "Stop resisting," he yells, the classic catchphrase used to justify force. But look at the physics of this struggle. He pins her against the wall, then slams her into the concrete. In the scuffle, Greta mentions she's had shoulder surgery, but Baer doesn't let up. He takes her to the ground and, according to the lawsuit, delivers the punch that shatters her jaw. You can hear the impact. You can hear the pain. This isn't de-escalation. It's a physical response to a verbal challenge. Now, let's get into the why behind the lawsuit. In the world of civil rights law, we look at the Graham factors to decide if an officer's use of force was objectively reasonable. The courts weigh three specific things, and for Officer Baer, the math just doesn't add up. $text, reasonableness, /approximate /text, severity, plus /text, threat, plus /text, resistance, $first, the severity of the crime. What was it? Loud talking? A disturbance, reported by a neighbor who wasn't even there? That's a low-level offense that justifies almost zero force. Second, was she an immediate threat? She's 64 years old, unarmed, and stands about a head shorter than the officer. There was no safety risk here. Finally, was she actively resisting or evading? The officer will say she walked away. But remember, if there's no reasonable suspicion of a crime, she has every right to walk. You can't create a resisting arrest charge out of thin air just because someone hurt your feelings. Internal Affairs caught on, too. They ruled this force was excessive. When a domestic check results in a broken jaw and no criminal charges, the system didn't work. It broke. If you thought the physical assault was the peak of this story, wait until you hear the legal audacity that followed. Greta Jensen wasn't just left with the trauma of the encounter. She was left with a fractured jaw that required surgery. But while Greta was in a hospital bed, Officer Baer was busy filling out paperwork, not for a medical referral, but for restitution. Believe it or not, this officer actually requested that Greta pay to replace his pants, which were torn during the scuffle where he broke her jaw. It's the ultimate insult to injury paradox. It shows a complete lack of situational awareness and a staggering level of entitlement. And then, there's the landlord, Jeremy. After the smoke cleared, he admitted to the other officers that Greta wasn't really yelling today. He called based on a text from a neighbor, a game of telephone that ended in a 64-year-old woman being slammed into concrete. This is why we say, freedom is scary, deal with it. Because when you call the police for a non-emergency, you might just be inviting a $1 million lawsuit into your driveway. It's cases like this that remind us, your rights don't end where a police officer's ego begins. Internal Affairs called it excessive force, and now a $1 million lawsuit is on the table to prove it. But ask yourself, is a pair of torn pants really worth a grandmother's shattered jaw? Spread this footage. Educate your neighbors. And if you've got Bodycam video that needs the Justice Valley treatment, hit that submission link below. Subscribe for more constitutional deep dives. Remember, freedom is scary. Deal with it.